Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Dao, Chapter 1015, Chapter 1. Beneath a sky heavy with salt and storm, where shattered wreckage drifted like broken bones upon a restless sea, the demonic snakes made their move. With thunderous force, they surged forward. Peng! Peng! The sea itself seemed to roar alongside them. Some of the serpents coiled their bodies and spat condensed pellets of water, each one dense with killing intent. Others lashed out with their tails, the strikes cracking through the air like whips forged from iron. Still others hurled themselves bodily against the floating debris, ramming again and again with relentless fury. Though their methods varied, their purpose was singular and merciless, to drive Ling Han and the remaining cultivators from their fragile refuge and cast them into the depths below. For once they fell into the sea, there would be no struggle left to speak of. In those waters, the demonic snakes ruled absolutely. There, the cultivators would become nothing more than prey. Faced with such a dire fate, no one dared conceal their strength any longer. This was no longer a battle of pride or restraint. This was survival. Each cultivator unleashed their full cultivation, their origin power surging forth like rivers breaking through a dam. Techniques that had once been hidden were now revealed without hesitation, their brilliance flashing across the chaotic battlefield. Ling Han stood among them, calm yet resolute. Though he did not truly fear death in this moment, he knew well that falling into the sea would spell endless trouble, to be dragged to the seabed under that crushing gravity and forced to crawl his way back to shore. Such a fate was as good as death itself. Thus he did not hold back. Drawing upon his strength, he bent his body like a divine bow, his origin power condensing into invisible arrows that shot forth with terrifying speed. Each motion was fluid, precise, each attack a silent declaration of dominance. He did not even need to rely on arrows forged from godly metal. And yet, even so, his battle prowess soared to 5 stars. One had to remember. Ling Han had already stepped into the early stage of the medium extreme. With this enhancement, his strength now rivaled those at the middle stage of the same realm. Against such power, the demonic snakes below the high extreme were nothing more than fleeting shadows. Instant death followed wherever his arrows flew. The technique he wielded, the annihilating dragon star arrow, was simply too swift. Those weaker than him could not even perceive its trajectory, let alone evade it. They were struck down before thought could arise, their lives extinguished in an instant. In ordinary combat, cultivators preferred to maintain a distance of several meters, 7 or 8 at most, where their techniques could flourish at their peak. But such a distance was meaningless before Ling Han. His arrows pierced through space itself. In that moment, none on the battlefield could rival his efficiency in slaughter. Yang Ticheng saw this clearly. With a decisive thought, he shifted his strategy. Rather than wasting effort on offense, he focused entirely on defense, anchoring himself upon the drifting wreckage and shielding it from collapse. He would guard their foothold and allow Ling Han to become the spear that pierced through their enemies. Shoo! 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 Arrow after arrow tore through the air, each one claiming life, each one reducing the swarm of serpents. The sea churned as bodies fell, and the nest of demonic snakes suffered grievous losses under Ling Han's relentless assault. Then, pang! The ocean split apart. From its depths rose a monstrous figure, its massive form coiling upward as if summoned from the abyss itself. Silver patterns gleamed along its scales, shimmering like moonlight upon steel. Demonic Snake King! Yang Ticheng's voice turned grave. Before anyone could react, Shua! The Snake King opened its jaws and spat forth a massive water pellet, its speed rivaling that of Ling Han's arrows. It arrived in the blink of an eye. Ha! Yang Ticheng roared, channeling every ounce of his origin power into his fist. With a thunderous strike, he met the incoming attack head-on. Pang! The collision erupted like a collapsing mountain. And yet, the force behind that single water pellet was overwhelming. Yang Ticheng was blasted backward, hurled hundreds of meters through the air before crashing into the sea below with a heavy splash. A stunned silence fell. Even Yang Ticheng had been overpowered? A chilling thought crept into every heart. Were they truly to perish here? Ping! From the churning waters, a figure burst forth once more, Yang Ticheng. His legs blurred as he ran across the surface of the sea itself, pushing his body to its absolute limits. Cold sweat streamed down his face as he fought against the crushing gravity field that weighed upon the ocean. This sea was no ordinary place. Its gravity was terrifying. Even for someone of Yang Tiecheng's strength, resisting its pull consumed immense amounts of origin power. The short distance he had traveled had already exacted a heavy toll. To sink beneath those waters would be certain death. Dozens of massive serpents lunged toward him at once. But Yang Tiecheng was no ordinary cultivator, a 3-star genius at the consummate level. His fists became instruments of annihilation. Each strike shattered a serpent, each blow sending blood spraying into the air. The space around him was soon filled with a crimson mist. The demonic Snake King grew enraged. With a violent twist, it plunged back into the sea, only to reappear an instant later directly before Yang Tiecheng. Its massive head rose high. Another water pellet began to form. "Go!" Ling Han's voice rang out, an arrow shot forth, but this time it was different. His eye of truth had already discerned the Snake King's weakness. At the same time, divine flame patterns ignited upon the arrow, amplifying its destructive power. Even the Snake King hesitated. Pa! With a swift motion of its tail, it deflected the arrow, but that moment of hesitation was enough. Yang Tiecheng seized the chance, leaping through the air and landing upon a small wooden plank. Though fragile, it granted him a brief respite, the plank bobbing upon the waves as he caught his breath. The Snake King's fury reached new heights. Its lantern-like eyes turned toward Ling Han, filled with killing intent as cold as winter frost. A chilling aura spread from its body, pressing down upon the battlefield. Ling Han felt his heart tighten. This creature was terrifyingly powerful. It stood at the threshold of the Sun-Moon tier, only a step away from true transcendence. The pressure it exuded was enough to make even him feel a cold shiver crawl through his bones. Its next strike would shake the heavens, and then voices of betrayal cut through the chaos. "It's him! That brat drew the Snake King's attention. Throw him into the sea, otherwise we all die with him." Lu Wu and Fan Yong, standing upon the same wreckage, glared at Ling Han with undisguised malice. The Snake King's gaze had locked onto him. If it attacked, everyone nearby would be caught in its wrath. But if Ling Han were sacrificed, they might survive a little longer, and perhaps, just perhaps, endure until rescue arrived. Such was their reasoning. Cold, selfish. Desperate, Ling Han's eyes turned icy. "Then why don't you two jump first?" he replied. "In your dreams. Today you die." The two roared in unison. They had come for his life from the beginning. Only fear had restrained them before. But now, death loomed over all, and fear had turned to madness. Both of them, elites of the high extreme, unleashed their full strength. Their attacks surged forward with overwhelming might. Ling Han snorted coldly. His 7-kill subduing soul technique activated instantly, targeting Fan Yong. But a barrier of light erupted around Fan Yong, blocking the spiritual attack completely. Fan Yong laughed wildly. "Ah! The young master gifted me a treasure that defends against divine sense, forged by a heavenly body tier elite. You didn't expect that, did you?" Ling Han's gaze flickered. Had his divine sword been here, Fan Yong would already be cleaved in two. But now, peng! The combined attack of the two struck him, and Ling Han was thrown from the wreckage. He fell into the sea. "Ling Han?" Shu Yanyu cried out in shock. Without hesitation, she leapt after him. "Idiot woman!" Fan Yong cursed. Yet his face darkened. Zhao Lun would never forgive this. He had intended to take Shu Yanyu as his wife after reaching the Sun-Moon tier, and now she had fallen into this sea, likely to die. How would they explain this? But there was no time to dwell. The battle surged once more. Kill, kill, kill! Though their numbers were few, every combatant stood at the mountain river tier, each one a vessel of heaven and earth's essence. Their blood was no ordinary blood. It was rich with vitality, brimming with power. As it spilled into the sea, the waters turned crimson. The scent drew countless lesser creatures, and worse, it drew something far more terrifying. From the depths, a massive flat fish emerged. Its body was broad and grotesque, with both eyes positioned on one side of its head. It moved with terrifying speed, its maw opening wide as it surged upward. In a single motion, over a dozen giant snakes vanished into its jaws. A presence descended upon the battlefield, a demonic beast at the Sun-Moon tier. And with its arrival, the sea itself became a true domain of death. The storyteller's voice lowered. heavy as the tide before a storm. At that moment, the heavens themselves seemed to tremble, because something far more terrifying than the battlefield had descended upon the sea, a demonic beast, one that had already stepped into the sun-moon tier. The instant its presence emerged, it was as if the laws of life and death had been rewritten. Cultivators who had moments ago been locked in desperate struggle now abandoned all thought of battle, fleeing in every direction like scattered leaves before a gale. Even the vast swarm of demonic snakes, creatures that had dominated the battlefield with savage confidence, lost all semblance of order. They fled without dignity, fled without hesitation. The once mighty demonic snake king, which had ruled the sea with ferocity and had stood just a step away from the sun-moon tier, now appeared pitifully insignificant, like a writhing eel before a monstrous leviathan, and the gigantic fish had already set its sights on it. There was no grand clash, no prolonged struggle. The demonic snake king was seized in an instant. Its massive body twisted violently, unleashing all the strength it could muster. But that strength, which had once inspired fear in countless beings, now amounted to nothing. The gap between its near breakthrough and true sun-moon tier was like the distance between earth and sky, a single snap. Its body was crushed within the fish's enormous jaws, bones shattered, flesh torn apart, and in the next heartbeat, it was swallowed whole. The storyteller paused, letting the weight of that moment sink in. A king, devoured without resistance. Yet even after consuming such prey, the gigantic fish did not appear satisfied. Its enormous form shifted through the sea with terrifying ease, its gaze locking onto the remaining life forms still struggling amidst the wreckage and chaos. And then it began its feast. It did not discriminate. Demonic snakes, cultivators, everything was the same in its eyes. One by one, figures disappeared into its maw. Cries of terror were cut short. Bodies vanished beneath the waves. The sea itself seemed to become a devouring abyss, swallowing all who remained within its reach. Only after it had indulged itself to its satisfaction did the monstrous creature flick its tail. With a single powerful motion, it vanished into the depths, leaving behind nothing but silence, broken waves, and scattered remnants of what had once been a battlefield. The storyteller exhaled softly. In but a few breaths, the tides of fate had turned beyond recognition. Moments ago, the demonic snakes had held absolute dominance. Under the command of their king, they had nearly wiped out every cultivator aboard the ship. But now, the vast swarm had been reduced to fewer than 10 survivors, and those few no longer posed even the slightest threat. Yet the humans had not escaped unscathed, not even close. The pirates, all slain. Luo dead. Zuo Xiao, dead. Of Sha Yuan's 4 loyal guards, only Liu Ying remained standing. The Yang clan had suffered grievous losses. Of the entire crew, only Yang Ticheng still lived. Alongside him, only Jin Jihui, Fu Qian, and Yin Yuanshang had survived. 7 people. Out of all who had once stood upon that ship, only 7 remained. The sea carried them away upon fragments of wreckage, drifting farther and farther from the place where blood had once stained the waves. Each of them sat in silence, their expressions heavy, their hearts weighed down by the cruel whims of fate. Then, huh? Yang Ticheng's eyes suddenly narrowed, surprise flashing across his face as he turned to look behind him. The others followed his gaze. In the distance, another piece of wreckage drifted across the surface of the sea, and upon it stood 2 figures, Ling Han and Shuai Yanyu. The air seemed to freeze. Shock spread across every face present. How? How could this be? Ling Han had endured the combined assault of everyone aboard the ship and survived. He had been hunted by a pirate elite and still lived. He had been blasted into the sea, into a nest of demonic snakes that should have torn him apart without mercy. Yet now, there he was, unharmed, standing as though nothing had happened. Even Shui Yanyu beside him appeared untouched by the chaos that had claimed so many lives. The unspoken thought echoed in every mind. Is this man immortal? Ling Han raised a hand and waved casually, his tone light as though greeting old acquaintances. Hey, long time no see. Together with Shui Yanyu, he paddled their wreckage closer. The contrast was almost unbearable. Everyone else bore wounds, exhaustion, and grief. Yet these 2 looked as if they had merely taken a leisurely trip across the sea. It was enough to drive a man mad. But unlike the others, Yang Ticheng's expression softened with genuine relief. You managed to come out of this unscathed, he said, his voice carrying a rare warmth. That's great. In his eyes, Ling Han had already proven his worth, slaying numerous demonic snakes and avenging fallen crew members. His respect had been earned, but as Ling Han stepped closer, his gaze swept across the group, and when it landed on Luo Wu and Fan Yong, a chill flickered in his eyes. These two had blasted him into the sea. If not for the protection of the Black Tower, he would have died. There would be no forgiveness, no forgetting, only death. What are you looking at? Luo Wu snapped coldly, no longer bothering to hide his hostility. At this point, survival itself was uncertain. There was no need for pretense anymore. After all, drifting helplessly in the open sea, any encounter with another demonic beast could spell their end. In Luo Wu's mind, all of this was Ling Han's fault. If not for him, why would they have come here? Of course, he never once questioned his own greed or malice. Ling Han's voice turned icy. I'm looking to see how you'll die. His body drew taut like a bow. His origin power surged like a drawn arrow. The annihilating dragon star arrow formed, its killing intent locking on to Luo Wu without mercy. A cold dread gripped Luo Wu's heart instantly. Once he had believed killing Ling Han would be effortless. But now, Luo Senyun had never even boarded the ship. Luo Yu was dead, devoured. Only he remained. And now, facing Ling Han's arrow, he felt fear. The environment itself had betrayed him. On land, he could have used his movement techniques to evade. But here, on a fragment of wreckage barely large enough to stand upon, there was nowhere to run. Jump into the sea? That would be suicide. His mind raced. Then, without hesitation, he darted behind Fu Qian, using the youth as a shield. Fu Qian's eyes blazed with fury, his body surging with savage energy as he roared like a wild beast. Fuck off! But Luo Wu refused to yield, clinging behind him. Don't worry, little friend, he sneered. You and him have no grudge. He won't shoot you. At that moment, absolutely shameless, Yang Ticheng's voice rang out like a thunderclap. With a swift motion, he grabbed Fu Qian and pulled him behind himself, placing his own body between Ling Han and the others. And in doing so, he exposed Luo Wu once more. Luo Wu's face drained of color. Captain Yang, he shouted urgently, I paid you to board this ship. You must ensure my safety. Yang Ticheng's expression turned cold. The ship has already been destroyed. My responsibility is ended, he replied. When we return, I will compensate everyone accordingly. Wrong, completely wrong. Luo Wu pointed at the wreckage beneath their feet, shaking his head vigorously. Look, we are still on the ship. Even if it's just a fragment, it's still part of it. You are still the captain. You are still obligated to protect your passengers. His words were shameless, yet not entirely without reason. And Yang Ticheng, being a man of principle, hesitated. Ling Han, do not attack him, he said, stepping forward to block Luo Wu. Behind him, Luo Wu burst into laughter. Ha! His arrogance returned in full. With Yang Ticheng protecting him, he had nothing to fear, at least for now, and once they reached land, Ling Han would no longer pose any threat. But in the very next instant, everything changed. Yang Ticheng turned around, his hand shot out like lightning, and seized Luo Wu by the throat. Eh! Luo Wu's laughter died instantly. His body stiffened, his face turning crimson as Yang Ticheng's grip tightened. Though cultivators could survive without breathing, their origin power could not circulate when their neck was locked like this. Given enough time, even their spirit would perish. Luo Wu struggled wildly, but it was useless. Yang Ticheng's strength far surpassed his own. Then, Yang Ticheng reached out again, and grabbed Fan Yong by the neck as well. The two men flailed helplessly, like insects caught in an iron grip. Although I won't let Ling Han kill you, Yang Ticheng said coldly, his voice devoid of mercy, I will not ignore that you deliberately blasted him into the sea. His arms moved, and with a violent motion, he flung both of them outward. Pah! They crashed onto the wreckage, drenched in cold sweat, their bodies trembling. It felt as though they had stepped through the gates of death and returned. When we leave this ship, Ticheng continued, his gaze like steel, I will personally deal with the two of you. Silence fell. Luo Wu and Fan Yong lowered their heads. But beneath that silence, dark, venomous thoughts churned within their minds.